everybody. Welcome to the Paddock Pass Podcast and the start of another MotoGP season here in 2026. Neil and I are in the media centre here at the Chang International Circuit. I, being Adam Wheeler, one of the media pack here. And Neil, another journalist as well. How's it been for you in terms of workload and adjustment to the new season, Neil?
Yeah, hot, extraordinarily hot. Maybe the hottest I've ever been this afternoon, trying to run around and chase a couple of riders after the Model 3 race. And now freezing cold in the media centre. I forgot to bring my jumper, and they've cranked the AC up. So, no doubt tomorrow I'm going to be paying the price for this.
It is actually funny that when you go to like Sepang or Thailand or whatever, the most important thing to pack is a warm jumper, because at some point you will be somewhere where they've got the air conditioning cranked down to about minus 76.
Well, the worst thing is Qatar, where they actually provide you with white blankets. It's that cold inside the media centre.
Because they try to create Bose-Einstein condensates.
The voice of science, and also the man that you can see on your screens with the fetching pink headphones is none other than David Emmett, motomatters.com expert, but not such quite a specialist in the kitchen, it has to be said. Do you want to show everybody your injury, Dave, for those watching on YouTube?
Yeah, so what I managed to do was grate and split my thumbnail, and I now understand why a medieval torture was pulling people's thumbnails out, because it hurts like something which hurts a lot. And the other thing is because this is my spacebar thumb, and so while I was typing and banging the spacebar with this, I was sort of wincing every time. So I actually have now a little cushion of paper wrapped around it to give me some protection from myself. But
the physical arduous of our profession, eh, Dave?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, I really shouldn't be allowed to operate anything.
Well, this is our first Paddock Pass Podcast review show, I should say, of the Grand Prix season. Neil and I have been doing Paddock note shows, which are on our Patreon channel. Thanks to all the listeners and subscribers for backing us again this year and providing us with some merriment on our Discord community chat channel, as well as some interesting questions that we're going to be filtering into our midweek show. If we have the good fortune to be able to escape Thailand, because of the geopolitical landscape is looking a little bumpy at the moment, and most of the paddock is slightly concerned or making alternative plans to get halfway across the world. Onto that a little bit later. On the show, we're going to be talking about, of course, the Thai Grand Prix, the first round of 2022, first round of 22 in 2026, and we'll be providing you with some of our opinions, some of our takeaways, and other business. First of all, just to kick things off, I want to ask you for your moments of the weekend. And Dave, coming to you first, you were keeping close tabs on this Grand Prix from the Netherlands. What was the thing that stood out for you most?
I mean, the moment that I think is going to be not just key to this weekend, but also a clue to what's going to happen this year, next year, and for the next couple of years until Marc Marquez retires, was Marc's pass on Pedro. That was during the sprint race. Yeah, in the sprint race, he came from quite a long way back. It was a very strong pass. He ended up getting a drop one position penalty. It was one of those sort of like borderline passes where sometimes you do penalise and sometimes you don't. But for me, that was Marc setting out a marker. That was him saying, listen, kid, no messing about. I know you're coming into my team next year, but don't get any ideas above your station. Whether I am top dog in this championship and I'm top dog in that in this team. And it almost smacked of desperation by Marquez, but not quite. But it was a power move in every possible sense of the word. It meant so much more than just that single position. It meant that was about, like this year, next year, the year after, and I absolutely love it. I love Marc for doing it, and I love Pedro for just not taking it.
Well, Neil and I talked about the subject comprehensively on Saturday. It was a great Saturday. Everyone was kind of walking around on sort of like with a spring in their step, it has to be said, after an electrifying sprint. One great excuse to go to Patreon and check out our note shows, because we did talk about that, the sanction, and then Neil, I believe your moment of the weekend is related to this particular incident.
Yeah, my moment happened about 2 minutes after Dave's moment, because the race had finished. Marc had to drop one position. And then obviously Pedro came through and took his first ever sprint victory, became the youngest ever victor in a sprint race in MotoGP history. And Marc, unsurprisingly, was not best pleased. And we were standing outside on the balcony watching the sprint race. And he came out of the final turn on his slowdown lap on his way to the sprint podium, which was along the start-finish straight. And, very sarcastically, pointedly applauded up in the direction of the race control tower where the FIM stewards are housed, to show exactly what he felt. And he had just about pulled himself together and composed himself in front of the camera when he was speaking to Jack Appleyard after the race. But yeah, for that little moment, you saw that there was real fury inside and real frustration. And we'll come on and talk about this controversial moment a little bit more in the podcast. But yeah, I just thought that was a brilliant moment. And we've been crying out for this in MotoGP for years, I think. A bit of controversy, two sides of the debate, which I think there's really good arguments and good reason on both sides, and just had everyone talking about it, which we haven't always been able to say about MotoGP in recent times.
Yeah, like we said, it capped a really exciting Saturday here in Buriram. For my moment of the Grand Prix, I'm going to fast forward to Sunday today, this afternoon, and again related to Marc Marquez, because when he had that problem that pretty much took him out of the running for the podium, around turn 4, he ran wide, tried to accelerate again, and then almost threw himself onto the concrete runoff area. We kind of assumed it was a Michelin problem, a flat tire. Upon sort of further examination, Ducati were quick to cover up the rear wheel, but you could see the rear wheel rim had collapsed. So and immediately the cameras, and this is a good example about why I think you need TV coverage in the pit lane, just had this image of Ducati Corsa general manager Gigi Dall'Igna with his mouth open, absolutely aghast at what he was seeing, and on what was a pretty difficult day for Ducati overall. The first time that the factory have missed a podium in sort of 89 Grand Prix, going all the way back to the sort of summer of 2021. It was, a colleague and friend of ours, Chris Hillard from Alpine, sort of turned around and said that's going to be something that's going to be reproduced on numerous occasions as a meme. But it was just another emotional capture of this Grand Prix, and a reminder of why the sport is so fucking cool. So yes,
is there a face that's more memeable than Gigi's? Because it really, he is very bad at hiding emotion, let's say. Any kind of thing that he is feeling is very much displayed on his face, and it's very expressive. I think it's the face of 1,000 memes.
Beaten only by Davide Tardozzi, who doesn't so much wear his heart on his sleeve, but parades it around on in a little showcase.
Guys, just before we get on to our takeaways, we do have some questions from Patreon listeners into the show, and we will be having more, as I mentioned, during the midweek show. But there's one here which I think kind of sums up things quite nicely for this opening round of the championship. And I just want to comment from you both. Daksha, now kind of famous, I guess, for having the Moto Girly Pop podcast with TV Room Raccoon. I will try and get my words out a bit better during this show. She says, are you all more excited for this year now, or do you think things were equalized towards boredom, and are you still waiting for 2027? So what's the feelings on this one, Neil?
I would just like to point out that I was actually in this frame of mind well before this first round of the season. Actually, leading up to Sepang, I was refinding my mojo. So January, it was a bit slow off the mark, I would say, and refinding my enthusiasm after a long, arduous 2025. But I was up for this one, and very much. I think if we go back and listen to last week's show, I was kind of pointing to maybe a slightly surprising result and quite a close competition. And I still think that the current number one will be the number one this year. I think we saw enough in this weekend to suggest that, but I think it's going to be a hell of a lot closer than what we saw last year.
Yeah, absolutely second. I think it was, this was a fantastic start. We have seen really good racing here before. This track does seem to produce good racing. It was exactly the right start to the season. Also, Pedro versus Marc is just absolutely box office. It's exactly what we needed. A little bit of controversy, lots of weird things, surprising winners. All of a sudden, Ducati being off of the podium. There's so much to go on. Now it is going to settle down. We will, later on in the year, there will be race weekends where we will struggle to sort of, justify our existence. But this was great, and it was also a reminder of what there was. And again, I love concessions. I want to, if I could take a second wife, it would be MotoGP's concessions, because the system is working so well. Aprilia have caught up, KTM have caught up, Honda are catching up, Yamaha have chance to improve, and Ducati's ceiling has been limited. They can still go faster, but they have to work that much harder to actually find anything, and it's sort of closed everything up, and it's made for just a much more interesting racing series.
Would you be in C category concessions, Dave, or D category?
I would. I would probably have to be in category. I mean, given this, I think that justifies me being in category D, because obviously I'll be replacing parts every 5 minutes.
He's managed to get a declaration of love in for Roja within the first 10 minutes of the podcast, Nelson. There's another little staple that's becoming quite consistent. Listen, takeaways from this GP: Marco Bezzecchi going 3 in a row because he won the final 2 rounds of 2025. Let's not forget the first time that Aprilia have won 3 Grand Prix in a row. He our sort of friend and colleague Matt Burt was saying, sort of bounce back Bez. By the end of the afternoon, and it was the kind of promise and hype that we'd seen during the test on Friday and even on Saturday, despite the little crashes here and there indicating that he was pushing as hard as he could. But this was brilliant stuff, and Aprilia as well, Neil. Pretty astounding results.
Yeah. In some respects, a dream weekend. It was almost a dream weekend. If Bez hasn't comprehensively effed up his sprint race, then it most certainly would have been, because it was clear from, I think, early on Friday morning that Bez had the run of absolutely everyone. I think he was nearly, towards the end of his run in FP1, he was nearly like a second a lap faster than Marquez. And it was like, oh, okay, we knew he was fast in the test, but it wasn't quite this comprehensive. And then, obviously the complications on Saturday, he crashed 3 times, once in FP2, once in qualifying 2, after he had set the pole time. And then, of course, again in the sprint when he had just got past Marc and was trying a little, maybe too desperately, to open up an advantage. He said on the Saturday that we, as in the media, who he loves so much, of course, were saying that everything was coming so easily to him on Friday. He was basically riding those times with one hand behind the bike, but he was saying, no, I was absolutely on the limit to try and do that. But then that just wasn't apparent today. I mean, as soon as he got into the lead, got the whole shot, I think he was like a second clear after 2 laps. He showed a few times at the end of last year, Portimao, where I think he maybe had an average sprint race, and then came back and won on the Sunday comprehensively. Did the same in Valencia, pretty average on Saturday, but fabulous on the Sunday. And the first time he's won 3 straight Grand Prix, the first time an Aprilia rider has won 3 straight Grand Prix. And I wouldn't say they're favourites at this point because we're still very early in the year, but early signs certainly good.
Dave, with Raul Fernandez from Trackhouse Racing finish on the podium twice, Ayagura looking quite strong as well, and Jorge Martin having a brilliant race. We spoke with him on Saturday, and he kind of admitted that was the best he's felt since 2024 MotoGP when he won the World Championship. Almost like 2025 didn't exist. It's almost like Aprilia went to the 4 corners of the Chang International Circuit and pissed their territory. It was like, they marked their ground. And this was apparent from the test days, and Bezzecchi just followed through on that. When Aprilia Racing CEO Massimo Rivola came to speak with us in the media center, so the first question I asked him was that the flyaways used to be a bit of an Achilles heel for Aprilia. It was the moment when their somewhat technical, mechanical inconsistencies would come to the fore. Now it's almost like a stronghold. When Aprilia are getting out and away from Europe, they're also pretty damn strong.
Yeah, but I mean, this is just a general part of the improvement. I think. I mean, funny about the flyaways. When Jorge Martin was under investigation for the tyre pressure during the sprint race, and they found that he'd had a dented rim, you thought, oh, right, it's another one of those Aprilia things where they're running parts right up to the sort of maximum mileage. But then, Marc Marquez in the main race sort of, basically disproved that by managing to destroy his rear rim. That this was a real problem. But they've just done a really good job. This is building on what they did last year. Again, shout out to the job that Lorenzo Savadori was able to do last year, thanks to Jorge Martin's absence, because it was Savadori going out working on electronics, making a big step with the engine character. It was, Aprilia's engineers helping with the aerodynamics, helping with the tail aero and all that to make the bike more stable. They made a big step in the second half of this year. They've made another small step in the over the winter, where it feels like maybe Ducati have lost their way a little bit, but that's allowed Ducati to catch up. Bez is just he's surfing on a wave of confidence, which is probably why he crashed, because he crashed 3 times on Saturday, which, it's a lot. And you could see even on his qualifying lap, when the lap that he crashed, he had a massive moment, I think in turn 4 or maybe turn 5, when his foot came off the peg, and then a couple of laps later he's on the ground, and that's just because he's pushing so incredibly hard. So yeah, I mean, their Aprilia are in really good shape. But you do wonder how much of it is specific to Sepang, specific to Buriram. Let's see. I mean, you can't say anything sensible about Brazil, because Brazil is a complete unknown.
An unknown quantity, isn't it?
Yeah.
But Dave, what about Fabio Sterlachini? I mean, we have to give him some credit, right? Because things seem to have leveled out, and the RSGP has become a bit more of a pliant motorcycle.
I think, I mean, as much as I love an engineer, I think it takes too long for engineers to actually start to make an impact. I think this year we'll start to see some really big steps from Sterlachini, because Sterlachini's been there, I think, 18 months. It's about now that you'll start to see it. But it's obvious that he has good ideas. He's good at organising. He's good at taking the right ideas and focusing on the right priorities. So, yeah, he's the right person in the right team. And he didn't seem to be a good fit in KTM, but sometimes that can just be, personal, just the way that you fit within an organisation.
Give him some spreadsheet tips, Dave. That might help speed things along. Neil, I want to talk about Pedro Acosta in a moment, because, for the first time leading the World Championship, a KTM rider, something I don't think any of us would have assumed was possible here at this race, considering how things went in 2025. But let's talk about Marc Marquez for the moment, because I think his competitiveness not surprised us a little bit. Also, what happened to him today in the race? Because we initially thought it was like a flat tire, maybe an issue with the Michelin, because the riders suffered in the heat. I mean, Pecco Bagnaia was even burning his fingers on the levers of the Ducati, but it turned out to be a wider issue, something to do with the wheel rims.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think it was an issue with Ducati's wheel rims or anything like that. It's like Dave previously mentioned about Jorge Martin's front wheel rim kind of slowly letting pressure out of the front tire after he ran over the curb on the exit of turn 4, and then Marc did the exact same thing. He got in a little bit hot into turn 4, I think on lap 21, lap 22, ran over the edge of it, and there's lots of concrete runoff over the edge of the apex there, and you see riders countlessly that get the braking a little bit wrong for that corner, using it as runoff and then rejoining soon after, and they don't lose too much time there. And yeah, when Marc kind of went over the curb and went down, that just cracked the rim, which then caused a very, very, very fast puncture. And Michelin were saying afterwards that two things were really to cause that. I mean, the track temperatures were ridiculously high. I think we were in track temperatures of 58 degrees during the MotoGP race, which was a little hotter than it was during the sprint. And then the edges of those curves are very, very aggressive. And I think those two things together, coupled with the fact that it was towards the end of the race, caused that spectacular implosion. And, fair play to Marc for being able to hold on to it, because that is something that could have got very, very nasty indeed, and really took some cat-like instincts for him to react to it and basically get the thing upright, even though it sort of veered round to his right, the rear tire. So he was lucky to get away with that one. But prior to that, it had been, I think, a very strong weekend. And while Ducati, there's a point, or you could make the point that they are in a bit of trouble, I think there's plenty to take away from Marc's weekend that will give them a lot of solace going into Brazil.
Yeah, because Marco didn't look as strong as he did in the sprint through the longer distance. He was kind of in podium contention, but not really, compared to the sort of the dispute for the win, you could say, on Saturday. What was your view, Dave? Marc Marquez is the first Grand Prix he had since October.
Well, yeah, I think that's really important. I think it's also he's still, building up the strength in his shoulder. He still doesn't know how strong his shoulder is. He said this during the test. He said this during this race weekend that he wasn't sure what his 100% strength was. He said that in the long race he'd taken it very easy in the first part of the race because he was conserving tyres and he was conserving his strength. So I think he was more resigned to losing points in the main race than in the sprint race. But I think it's not really representative of where Marc is. It's not really representative of where Ducati is. I think we're going to see more of what Marc is in Brazil, and especially in Kota. I think in Kota you'll get to see where he really is, and also whether he manages not to fall off again like he did last year. But yeah, I think Marc is. I think he's going to end up in much better shape.
Yeah, I thought he was really impressive on Saturday. Almost out of nothing, put the bike in second, just a little bit off Bezzecchi's pole time, and then, as we'll come on to in a little bit, that sprint performance was just out of this world. And just the way he sort of grabbed the initiative and, was absolutely adamant that Pedro Acosta wasn't going to get by, even though he was so obviously faster in the last sector of the track. And then again today, he was comfortably fast as Ducati. And it was clear that something just wasn't quite right early on. He was trying to be a little conservative, as Dave said, but he was still pretty confident that he could have caught certainly Raul Fernandez for third. And he was kind of saying that he could have maybe even caught Pedro as well. I'm not quite sure about that, but he seemed to think that he was saving the best for the last. And Dave, you said that this might not be indicative of the championship ahead, but I was going back and looking at the history of the Thai GP, and I think in every year that we've come here since 2018, with the exception of 2022 in the rain, 2 of the top 3 in the championship have finished on the podium here. So it's been, I think, fairly good, this track, at giving you an idea of how the championship will pan out or how it is going. Maybe that's a bit of a concern for Ducati.
Raul
slap some money on Raul Fernandez finishing top 3 in the championship.
Exactly, yeah, yes, Raul to win with Bezzecchi second then.
Yeah, and then just blame Neil when it all falls apart. Dave, we didn't see a Ducati in the top 5 here. It was, Fabio Di Giannantonio said he had a technical issue from lap 7 and pretty much struggled. He rode to 6th place, I think. Franco Morbidelli had an amazing race. I mean, he was almost last in the first 2 laps and worked his way all the way back up to 8th while nursing his rear tyre. Pecco Bagnaia, just a torrid weekend, it has to be said, starting all the way from Friday, not making Q2. And, Marc Marquez, we talked about Alex Marquez as well, not happy with the setup on the Gresini Ducati and crashing out on the same corner where Marc had his problem with the rear wheel. Why did Ducati struggle here?
It's genuinely a difficult question. I think, first of all, we have this problem that, or Ducati have the problem of a lack of testing. They only have Pedro to rely on, and that puts them, that gives them a disadvantage. Aprilia have made a step forward. They've made a big step forward. The fact that they were 4 in the top 5 on Sunday and 3 in the top 4 on Saturday, that is a sign that there's something really, really good. KTM have given Pedro Acosta at least what he needs, because he was just looking fantastic. I think overall the KTM is slightly better, but that hasn't helped anyone else, which again tells you how good Pedro is, but we'll come to him later. They just seem to be struggling with the tyres. That normally one of their strengths was being able to use this special heat-resistant tyre, and they couldn't get anything extra out of it. I wonder if Ducati have sort of run into a bit of a developmental dead end where they've basically created the perfect MotoGP bike under the existing regulations. They built that in 2024, and they're pretty much stuck with it. And they're just sort of like twiddling around the edges. And whenever sometimes when you twiddle around the edges, you make things a little bit worse rather than a little bit better. But again, it's Thailand. It's. I know.
Well, Dave,
everyone,
they were supposed to have.
Yeah, but everyone hates it when I say this, but it's true. You have to wait until we get back to Jerez. We have to wait till we get back to the European tracks, because that's where they have computer the entire data centers full of data on those tracks. They know how the bike behaves, and that's really what the bikes are designed for, because that's where you win a championship.
But they just had 2 full days of testing before we came here, and they were all very, very comfortable there. And I think that was one of the slight question marks, because Ducati did look really good here during the test. Even on Friday, Gian Antonio looked fantastic, and he was saying, I think it was he heavily intimated that it was his ride-out device that was slightly dysfunctioning or malfunctioning during the race. So yeah, he felt that was something that cost him. But yeah, I mean, just pretty much across the board, we didn't see any sort of translation from the test to here. And yeah, I think Marc looks okay considering his physical condition, but the other guys, that would be, Alex Marquez, Pecco Bagnaia, guys that we expected to be fighting for the championship. I'm not seeing
the
quite
ride height was supposed to be new and fancy, wasn't it?
That's the trouble. That's the trouble with new and fancy stuff. It breaks more often because we
heard from numerous riders, Dave, that they are actually not using it so much, just to try and keep that rear tire as pristine as possible, and all the way through to the end of the 26 laps. I think Enea Bastianini said on his KTM he barely used it at all. It seems quite incredible now in this day and age.
Yeah, but genuinely, every time at some point, I'm going to put together a series of the development over it, because like every time I look in the front and the nose of that Ducati, they've added yet another extra cylinder and a little an adjustment valve and God knows what else, because they're trying to sort of squeeze the very last little bit out of it.
Dave, you mentioned Pedro Acosta. Our third takeaway from this Grand Prix has to be about the Spaniard's potential, because this was, like we said, a marked improvement over 2025. At this Grand Prix 12 months ago, he left the circuit in a surly, kind of frustrated, angry mood, and it kind of lasted. It took Maverick Vinales actually quite unexpectedly to be able to show Pedro quite publicly what the KTM was actually possible of if you sort of applied yourself and got a bit more methodical. Afterwards in the press conference, he said that he's more mature, he's staying more in a chilled zone, I think was his phrase, when he's experiencing some difficult moments on track. But I don't know who's got an opinion first. Neil, perhaps what he did on Saturday, the way that he challenged Marc. I think you guys mentioned this, Dave, in your moments opening the podcast. And then, of course, what he did today as well, pushing up from P6 on the first lap, to reach second place, lead the championship. It's like, okay, guys, Acosta really has the tools to kick and the experience to kick on.
Don't want to be that guy that says, I told you so, but wasn't I the one that was making the case for Acosta being a championship challenger this year? While everyone else was rolling their eyes and, ignoring him as if he was just, some other ordinary rider. But yeah, I think our patrons thought this as well. 47% of them voted for Pedro as their rider of the weekend in our Patreon poll straight after the race. And it was a great performance. I mean, this was supposed to be KTM bogey track. As you mentioned, I had a horrible time last year. And all through the Acosta really did play a blinder, I think, in testing, because he not only seemed to work everything out for himself and get ready for the GP in time for the GP itself. The other three KTM riders didn't quite have that luxury, but he also really succeeded in just playing down everyone's expectations, and I think playing down even maybe his own expectations to a certain extent. Like, he did fly under the radar. No one was, well, apart from myself, very few people were actually saying like, oh yeah, Pedro Acosta's really one to watch, because, you know, testing was average. He was, what, half a second off per lap, the Ducatis in the Sepang sprint simulations. Yet come yesterday, he was charging up to first from sixth on the grid, you know, charging up to second from sixth in the grid again today, and just looked, you know, he's really able to maximize his strong points, which is late braking. We saw that countless times going into turn 12.
Yeah, amazing.
And, you know, it just seems that the bike this year just has that little extra bit of margin, which just allows him to do that without being on the ragged edge and without risking crashing in every corner like he was apparently at last year. So, yeah. I thought it was a brilliant weekend, yeah. And, you know, I mean, it's not the arrival of Pedro Acosta, I would say, because I think we saw that, you know, consistently towards the second half of last year, but he certainly set out his stall, I think, this weekend.
Neil, I'm glad you got the wide angle on your camera so you can just fit your head into shot. You know, it's quite handy for YouTube, you know, and also try and give yourself a pat on the back while you're there.
He's been doing yoga he's been doing yoga to make sure he's actually, you know, limber enough to be able to do that.
One point, Dave, before I ask you your opinion on Pedro, just one point about the track, because some riders were pondering this, particularly amongst the Ducati brigade, because the conditions had changed from the test, and Maverick Vinales was sort of indicating that there was more grip. Alex Marquez was saying that it was pushing the rear tire a little bit more, which was causing turning issues and obviously front sensation feeling. It does go to show that, you know, especially when you get the other classes, you know, the Pirelli rubber on as well. And I think, Neil, it might have been on Thursday, absolutely bucketed down for a couple of hours. I mean, it was real sort of monsoon conditions. It also rained on Saturday evening as well. So it was the track was getting some, you know, varying conditions, it has to be said. Maybe that affected what we ultimately saw this afternoon. But your thoughts on Pedro, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very good reason why Pedro is so chill. That's because he's whenever he's feeling down, he takes the little Ducati contract out of the drawer, has a look at it, and thinks, "Oh, everything's going to be fine next year." So there's that. But I mean, the fact that he finishes 12 seconds ahead of his teammate, the fact that he is, I mean, more than any other factory, they're the biggest disparity between the ride, you know, between the lead rider and the rest is Acosta, and that is, you know, that's basically the gold standard, the benchmark for is it rider or is it bike. And I don't think anyone doubted Acosta. I think what we doubted was his was the KTM, but the KTM have done the work. They've given him at least enough tools for him to start to be able to fight, and I think that's the best thing.
Yeah, and just very quickly, I went through last year's race times and compared them with this one. And I mean, the race winning time was very, very similar. Bezzecchi's time from today to Marquez's from last year. But quite interesting comparing some of the top manufacturers where they compared to 1 year ago. And obviously one or two slight things which don't kind of convey the real development of the factories and where they're at, because Marc obviously crashed out, or retired, sorry, when he was top Ducati. Joan Mir also retired when he was top Honda. But yeah, basically the fastest KTM in 26 compared to the fastest KTM in 25, 15 seconds faster. The fastest Aprilia this year compared to last year, 8 seconds faster. The fastest Honda compared to last year was 2 seconds slower. The fastest Yamaha this year compared to last year, 7 seconds slower. And Ducati, 15 seconds slower compared to last year. So yeah, I mean, that itself shows that you know, KTM has made a really substantial step.
Takeaway 4 from the Thai Grand Prix, Dave. Are tyres becoming a safety issue? I mean, what I mentioned before about the rear grip pushing the front too much is a little bit of a shame we didn't get that new front tyre from Michelin, but understandable considering this is their final year in the championship. But considering what happened to Honda riders, how everyone was nursing the bikes around, you know, at the end of the 26 laps, do we have cause to be concerned? Because we're going to have to use this harder carcass again a couple of other times this season.
I think the conditions were exceptional. You know, 58 degrees is some of the hottest that we've ever had. I think there's I can't remember which year it was. I think we've seen 60 degrees once in Indonesia, perhaps the first or the second year. These were exceptional conditions. Also, this is a really strange track. Again, around Indonesia, you're much more on the side of the tyre a lot more. Here, it's all straight up and hard acceleration. Every time they find a little bit more horsepower, you can get a little bit more acceleration, and that loads the center of the tire that much more. That's why riders are, they're literally not using the ride height device now to be able to save the rear tire, because you can't put that much load into it, and especially in conditions like this, in extreme heat. I think basically, Michelin have. They basically stopped development on their tyres as soon as they found out that they were losing the contract. These are exact same tyres that we raced here last year, but the bikes are a little bit better. The bikes have got more power. They always find a little bit more power. They've got a little bit more electronics. It was also interesting hearing, I think Joan Mir and some of the KTM riders saying, we were having problems with electronics, because I think what also happens is the tire starts to spin, it starts to take off a bit of the tire drops faster than the electronics are expecting, and the electronics simply, they can't adjust themselves anymore. The electronics just can't cope with the lack of grip, so you end up sort of doing end up with electronics which are too aggressive for the rear tire, and it really starts to eat through the rear tire. So I think who is to blame for this? I mean, everyone is to blame for this, in that the bikes are too powerful. The tires aren't really, I mean, Michelin want to impress with lap times, and so they make fast tires. What they could have done is bought basically a chunk of concrete, which would have lasted the race and been perfectly fine, but would have been sort of 5 seconds a lap slower. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to post impressive lap times. So, yeah, and just the time. Sometimes you get lucky or unlucky, a bit like Silverstone. Sometimes you turn up at Silverstone and it's 4 degrees in the morning, and it's really, really dangerous, and there's not a lot you can do about that. That's just the way that weather works. And I think that this is also what happened to Buriram. We turned up, it was exceptionally hot. There's been a proper heat wave through that part of Southeast Asia. It was extremely hot in Sepang as well, and I think that it was just a combination of factors which really overstressed the tires.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pecco Bagnaia said that he had really tried to manage his rear tire from the very start, wasn't close to pushing toward 100%, and was getting spinning in 5th gear when he was upright, going down towards turn 3 toward the end of the race. And that's a pretty exceptional circumstance. You could see Bezzecchi on the final lap, how gingerly he was having to ride. I mean, it looked as though his rear tire had just turned to jelly. Going into the final turn, it looked like it was, Michelin wouldn't appreciate me saying this, but about to explode. I did think it was quite interesting listening to Luca Marini, because he was quite adamant that it wasn't the tires' fault, and it was more down to potentially the managing of the rear tires. He said it was on the limit, but he said that they knew it was going to be that way. Michelin had warned them all that the medium rear was going to be like that, and there were kind of ways to basically get it last to the end of the race. And I think he was maybe very subtly implying that Joan Mir had not quite followed those guidelines and maybe gone a little bit too hard. As Dave said, exceptional circumstances. The really interesting thing is that this used to be something Ducati would eat up, and now it seems that this is a real deficit for their bike.
Yeah, about the conditions, Neil mentioned it earlier, the fact that Pecco Bagnaia was basically burning his fingers on Saturday on the brake lever, because there's a lot of brake force, and that heat goes into the brake discs, and that sort of like also rises up into the rest of the bike, but it just couldn't cool. There was no way to actually cool it, and so his brake lever is overheating. Perhaps also that could have been a contributing factor with the rims. These I think they're magnesium rims that they use. They're probably reaching 200 degrees, something like that. They're getting very, very hot, and so they're not melting, but they're starting to lose the very first part of that structural integrity. They do dent just that little bit easier. I think these were just really, really extreme conditions. And as Neil says, as Luca Marini, I mean, like, I'm not going to argue with Luca Marini. I don't think anyone should. But yeah, it's about managing. It's about understanding what the conditions are going to be like, setting it up, and then managing riding to those conditions.
Takeaway 5, the Marc Marquez penalty. Neil, you and I talked about this on Saturday, and we both kind of felt that it was unjustified. I think that was probably influenced by a lot of the riders' opinions as well, where they kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, look, this is racing. If you're going to stop us racing under these kind of guidelines or conditions, then, what's going to happen? I think Ralph Fernandez said, this is part of motorsport, and, that whole kind of, if there's a gap cliche, you got to go for it. And so I think the weight of opinion, some of the weight of the public opinion anyway, was directed towards, the race stewards based on that. But then, Dave, you have a slightly different opinion. I want to hear your opinion, actually, because we didn't get to talk to you. And you felt that, in fact, it was, it should have, Marc deserved that drop one penalty position that cost him the chance at a 16th sprint victory.
Yes, exactly. And not because I think that this was a particularly egregious act. He wasn't, he wasn't kamikaze. He wasn't trying to kill it. It was one of those moments where he was right on the limit. It was absolutely 50-50, and we see a lot of those moments, 50-50. But the trouble is, if you don't punish a 50-50 moment, or rather, if you every time a 50-50 moment happens where it could go one way or other and you never punish it, it stops being a 50-50 moment. It just becomes the way it is. Sometimes when something is 50-50 and it could go either way, you have to look at the greater context. We know that Marc has been involved in one or two controversial incidents in the past.
What are you talking about?
Nothing really springs to mind at all, but apparently this is what people tell me. And also I felt it was a little bit. It was not, like I said at the start, it wasn't about the win. It wasn't about coming first. He wouldn't have done that to Ralph Fernandez because he wouldn't have been worried about for Ralph Fernandez. This was Pedro Acosta. This was Marc was setting the tone. And sometimes when someone sets the tone that forcefully, race direction has to step in and says, easy now, boy, you're not in charge here. We're in charge here. So he was getting his wings clipped a little bit. And it wasn't,
it wasn't illegal. It was unjust.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't illegal. It could have been. I mean, it was, like I say, it was 50-50. Was it illegal? Was it unfair? It was a little bit unfair. It was no more unfair than properly dangerous. But sometimes,
Dave, and Marc said he wants consistency.
Yeah, Marc can say all sorts of things. I did like Franco Morbidelli, on the other hand, said that he praised the steward's consistency. You know exactly where you are. I think
because he's trying to build positive credit for later in the year. That's what we were joking about.
Exactly. But we used to have a penalty point system, and this is very much like a penalty point system. It's just that it's an unwritten penalty point system. So, Marc Marquez over his career has built up a lot of sort of penalty points which haven't been cashed, and at some point, those will get cashed because he'll deserve it. He needed to be put in place, and this was exactly the kind of moment. Also, it's the first race of the season. It's literally the first race of the season. As the stewards, you also want to set the tone for a bit like a referee in a football game or a rugby game. That first foul, you set the tone by how you deal with it. If you let it pass, then basically you're going to end up with an absolute sort of shit fight. And so by setting the tone, everyone knows where they are. Then they've been shown where the limit is, and then it'll be nudging up against that limit for the rest of the season. But I think this was, again, the greater context. It wasn't Pedro versus Marc. It was Marc
versus the man.
Yeah, exactly. It was Marc saying, listen, you might be coming into my team next year, but don't get any ideas above your station.
Neil, have you revised your opinion? Yeah, you said you kind of said it's a bit of an arsehole move on Saturday.
It was an arsehole move. It was an absolutely emphatic arsehole move. I mean, Pedro had shown Marc 3 times previously how to make that move in a completely clean way that wasn't going to completely disrupt the other rider. Although let's be also completely honest here, Pedro did it and it wasn't effective because Marc was able to get him back on each occasion that Pedro attempted to move. What Marc did was absolutely make sure that when he passed Pedro wasn't going to be able to get past him. In fact, not just that, but Pedro was going to lose a lot more time than that. But however, the way that Marc did it was by not being out of control. He was in control into the corner. It was an arsehole move because there was contact and because I think he knew exactly what he was doing. Yeah. But he was in control and he still made the corner. It wasn't as if he was running right the way out to the curb. He missed his apex, but he wasn't really, really deep.
He did he did hit his apex. His apex was Pedro Acosta, not actually the inside of the corner.
Yeah, there wasn't that much contact.
And we said this yesterday. There was a bit of we saw a bit of a precedent in the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix in 2024, Enea Bastianini in the last lap with Jorge Martin down into turn 4. On that occasion, Enea actually did exceed track limits, but only because he was looking over his shoulder to see what had happened to Martin to make sure he hadn't crashed. But at that point, I seem to remember myself praising the stewards for not getting involved and saying, let them race, let them go out and race. And I think that's a good thing. And yeah, look, I think Dave makes a really good point, and there's no question. I think you phrased it really nicely yesterday, Dave. Marc has lost the benefit of the doubt over his career, and there have been times where he's been right on the limit and a little bit naughty and very, very cheeky.
But we love that, Neil. We
exactly.
want that.
Do you think he's going to stop, though? I mean, do you think this is going to stop him?
No, and I hope he doesn't.
He also said, that he is going to, this is the new MotoGP and he's going to have to adapt to it. And I've mentioned Misano 2024, but obviously there's a big difference in this now, and that is there is a new chief FIM steward in Simon Crafar. And what I hear, he had a writer's briefing on Thursday and he said he wanted to make things as safe as possible and as fair as possible. And in his view, Marc's move wasn't unsafe, but he didn't think it was fair. And he looks at riders like Zarco, Quartararo and Acosta. When they try overtakes, it's fair. And he didn't think Marc's thing was fair. And it's not like he got a long lap penalty or anything.
Exactly.
It was a drop 1 position. But by the same, I still think that because of the situation in the race, that advanced stage of the race, I think he should let that fly.
It's another thing in the media debrief was that Marc was criticising the timing of the penalty. And I thought it actually came through quite fast. And he said, why not wait until 45 minutes after the sprint and then, look at all the video evidence and make a decision? But that's something that we've been complaining about over the last few years.
Exactly.
We don't want that. Yeah, you don't want it to be decided. It wasn't maybe the most appetizing way for it to be decided where he's sitting up and waving Pedro through at the last corner. But again, you don't want it to be revised 45 minutes later. I think that's an even worse image for the sport.
Yeah, I mean, and if you think about it, because I looked at the timing and from what we saw on the screens, so basically from the moment it happened until the moment that we saw that the message had been sent was 1 minute and 15 or 1 minute and 16 seconds, which is really, really quick to actually take a decision. You've got to get 3 people to agree. You've got to review it, review the incident a number of times from different angles. It's a really tight decision window. And you've got, look, a lap is, 130 something, 137, whatever it is. You're just not going to be able to do it in time.
Our last takeaway, guys, it's a little bit of fun, but I want your opinion. MotoGP, instead of having the usual cattle truck parade for the riders, they stuck them in a series of tuk-tuks before the Grand Prix. And Dave, I know you're not a great fan of these gimmicky kind of events, but I do want to know what you thought because it was brilliant. I mean, people were stopping what they were doing here and just, just giggling away at what they saw. It looked as sketchy as fuck. I mean, I cannot believe. I mean, Jack Miller and and top back, the sort of the World Superbike champion just endeared themselves even further to MotoGP fans and people watching around the world. Just, it was fantastic. I mean, Miller was doing it in Crocs, bouncing on the back of this tuk-tuk. Great idea, but I'm just amazed that nobody got wrecked.
I mean, I shall be honest, I didn't see it because it was,
Oh, jeez.
While I'm asleep.
Professionalism on the podcast.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm definitely going to get up to watch the Rider Parade, aren't I? Yeah. No, but I mean, it reminded me of this is how Valentino Rossi got started, racing these 3-wheel Piaggio Apes up and down the what is it, the road between Ricci or Cattolica and the other town in Italy whose name I've completely Urbino. That's the one. Anyway, it sounded like a good crack. I think it's great.
Well, yeah. Okay, I'm going to ignore you now. Neil, what did you think?
I thought it was great. Yeah, it was funny. It was silly. It was a good time. I enjoyed it. Yeah. It made me laugh. I did laugh. Yeah, I can't say I've ever laughed during the Rider Parade, but during the tuk-tuk race, I did laugh.
Would you like to see more sort of hijinks like that in MotoGP? Because the key thing was the riders seemed to have a laugh.
Exactly.
They were, and that kind of shows a bit of the personality as well. Marquez was flicking water at someone else. Top Rat was leaning out like it was a sidecar. Martin cut the final corner, I think, and just barreled this thing across the grass in a bit of a dash to the line. It was a caper. I mean, the only thing I will say is that I heard from quite some teams behind the scenes that MSEG's kind of organization of it was a bit slapdash. I mean, the lack of communication, everything last minute again. And, is it worth mentioning? Yes, because at the moment, with the MSMA and MotoGP Sports Entertainment Group trying to find this agreement to move forward for the next half a decade of the sport, and having a little bit of a standoff, it would seem. There's like an area of diplomacy between the teams and the promoters and the organizers that's, it's a bit edgy. And I think, there needs to be someone who's better equipped at dealing the teams, talking to the teams, getting them on side, trying to promote this new image of wired differently. There has to be more effort put into that just to harmonize things and make things like this easier to happen.
I mean, it sounds like it was the right thing. It reminds me of 2000. I think it was 2008, the Assen World Superbike round. The pre-event was them racing Solexes, which are basically bicycles with an engine on the front, dressed like 1960s, dressed in 1960s fashion with these long black coats and piss pot helmets. So it was, yes, that's exactly the sort of thing that we need to do to make it more fun. This is supposed to be fun.
Just before we get into a couple of questions, a reminder that we're still backed by Renthal. So if you have a street bike and you're after a decent accessory like some handlebars, grips, chain wheels, then head to renthal.com. Don't worry about a particular product for the motorcycle that you have, because there's a Fit My Bike tool to be able to select exactly what you need for what you have. So thanks to the guys at Renthal. Just very quickly, a couple of questions. Neil, one for you. Just give us a 1 or 2 line answer. Jono asked, is David Alonso okay?
He is okay, yes. Thankfully, mercifully, because it was a really ugly crash. Smashed into the back of St. Agius, got run over by Philip Salach. Was originally taken to the medical centre with pain in his arm, but no fractures were discovered. I think he's going to have another checkup at some point before he returns to Europe. But yes, miraculously he's okay. I saw he was being interviewed with DAZN. He's posted on his Instagram page, and it seems as though he's just a bit battered and bruised.
Dave, Yanni Voltonen says, how high do you rank Rammenstorfer as a rider name?
Stefan Rammenstorfer. He's a fucking great name.
Leo
is it Leo? Okay, Leo Rammenstorfer. Even better. Yeah, no, I'm all in.
The best, right, okay. The best name since Tony Finsterbruch, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Germans are just very good at compound nouns.
And then VJ says, what happened to Maverick? When the other KTMs were behind, he was in front. Now he's behind, and the others are in front. Maverick was. I've never seen him so angry on Saturday. He tried something to fix the front grip issues he was having during warm up. Didn't work. He was overshooting corners, struggling to keep the bike between the white lines. It really just seemed that harder carcass just couldn't get going at all. We could be very cynical and say this was a classic case of a Maverick reverse. I mean, it would be very, very typical of him to go out and put the thing on pole position in Brazil, for example. But yeah, it was just a case of,
no.
I think Maverick, I spoke to his crew chief and he said that, Maverick is trying to play catch up now because the motorcycle that he had, and he was leading the other KTMs at the beginning of 2025, is quite different to the one that the quartet have now. So Maverick's still a work in progress.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, Maverick, the random number generator, still lives on. But I think this is something we should dig into the KTMs more during our midweek show.
2 more sections to go. Winners and losers. Neil, who is your winner from the Thai Grand Prix?
My winner is Jorge Martin. This was his big injury comeback round. He was top 5 in qualifying, he was top 5 in the sprint, and he was 4th in the race, his best ever result with Aprilia in MotoGP, albeit in a very small kind of sample size. But yeah, for a guy that was struggling to get through the sprint simulation 1 week ago, to finish the 26 laps in relatively decent shape. Okay, he just about got over the line before Ayagura caught him. But I mean, this is way ahead of schedule. Sure, the Aprilia was on absolutely sensational form here this weekend, but Martin, I don't think he could have dreamed of even having a better comeback. Yeah, and one phrase stood out from his debrief today. He said, "I think we can really be up there fighting for the championship," which yeah, is quite remarkable. I mean, I was getting towards the end of last year that maybe this just was going to be one of those relationships that never worked, and he would just have to go off to pastures fresh in 2027 and start again. But no, it looks as though that's not going to be the case, and yeah, could well be another name that we see up at the front on occasion this year.
At the moment, it's a brave man to move away from Aprilia and sign for Yamaha, but
yeah, exactly. That's going to be fun.
That seems what Jorge, appears to be what Jorge has done. My winner is going to be Massimo Rivola, just purely because of the fact that Aprilia at this Grand Prix are the manufacturer to beat. But also, I want to give a nod to Top Rack. Everything from his behaviour in the tuk-tuks to what was a pretty impressive race during the sprint on Saturday, trying as hard as he could today, of course. I think Paolo Pavezio came to speak to us instead of the Yamaha riders. We'll get to that in a moment, but he sort of said that Top Rack was trying to ride the M1 like it was a super bike and actually changed his chip and is actually trying to ride it like a GB bike now. But even little things like I think it was he giving a lift back to Diogo Moreira at one point. Just a genuinely good guy, charismatic as well, and a big addition to the GP paddock. Dave, who was your winner?
My winner is Pedro Acosta because, first of all, he showed KTM, give me the tools and I can win this for you. Secondly, he showed Marc Marquez, look, I'm on a worse bike with you and I will fuck you up. I am not afraid of you. He's genuinely, I think, the first rider who is not afraid of Marc Marquez. No respect from him at all, which is exactly what you want. And he proved to himself as well that he can do this. He has matured a little bit and just showed everyone he's the business. The fact that he's so far ahead of the rest of the KTM riders, if anyone had any question marks left, Steve, then they should be removed.
Well, guys, where there's a flight on a private luxurious jet, there's also an economy ticket on a Qatar Airways flight that doesn't seem like it might be going for a week from Bangkok. So, Dave, give us your loser from the Grand Prix.
Well, my loser ties in very nicely with my winner because my loser is Davide Tardozzi because next year Davide Tardozzi is going to have to manage Marc Marquez and Pedro Acosta in the same garage. Well, good luck with that, mate.
Neil?
Two-pronged attack for me. Firstly, I'm going to say Yamaha for cancelling their rider debriefs today when it wasn't actually that bad. I mean, I thought they were going to be maybe 50 seconds off in the race, but they weren't. I mean, it wasn't shocking for a brand new bike. No, they weren't. Pedro was last. And Fabio Quartararo also beat Maverick Vinales, 30 seconds off. So I don't think it was anywhere near as bad as I was thinking, yet they cancelled their riders' debriefs and sent up Paolo Pavesio to talk instead and didn't notify the media of it. And then Pavesio just arrived in the debrief section when we were all going down to the official press conference. And it was just like, where's the communication? Why is Pavesio here? What's going on? I don't understand this. So that was
Pavesio sent Pavesio up.
Yes, yeah. Pavesio likes that.
But then I'm going to also go with Pecco Bagnaia, top 3 speed here during the test last weekend. Did a sprint simulation on the first day of the test, which was supreme, amazing. Half a second a lap faster than Pedro Acosta. But I mean, it was kind of a bit of a throwback to the 2025 Pecco. I mean, jitters on Friday when the rain came during practice, which messed up his rhythm. He didn't really manage the situation very well. He was poor in qualifying, just average in the sprint and the race. I mean, it was kind of just anonymous, really. At no point did he look like he was going to do anything. It didn't quite give me it didn't strike me as, this is a world championship push in the making kind of vibe from Pecco, if I'm being completely honest. And I was not expecting to say that, coming into the weekend.
My loser, I'm going to say Joan Mir. I thought Mir was great up until the point where he just chewed out his like a huge, it seemed 2-inch groove in his rear tire, and it's just another kind of entry into the catalogue of bad luck for the Spaniard. And you have to say at the moment, well, yes, at the moment we kind of know Fabio Quartararo is going to be in those casual HRC colours, but then the kind of battle for the seat next to him is still to be decided. And I think Mir did his case the world of good. It was quite a robust performance in sort of the mid top 10. He was making moves. He was throwing the Honda around at will. He was evidence of the fact that the Japanese have made another small step, which we were kind of wondering about after the preseason tests. So poor Juan. Even my 17-year-old son, Jordy, sent me a message saying, poor Joan Mir, after being forced to pull out, 3 laps before the end of the Grand Prix. All that hard work for nothing. But another chance in Brazil, Joan. Grades for the Grand Prix, I'm going to keep talking. I'm going to give it an 8. I think the combination of MotoGP being back, serving up some really cool entertainment. There was a phase in the race today that I guess is best described as strategic. We were waiting a little bit to see who would fade, who would be able to make a difference in the pace. And by the last sort of 4 or 5 laps, we were treated to some more drama in this series. 2026 could be a snoozer. Still a long, long way to go. Another 42 races ahead. But, I thought this was a great serving on a track that produces pretty good racing. Roll on the next one. What was your numerical award, Neil?
I'm going to actually mirror you, Ad. I'm going to go with Nate as well. I thought the race today, it wasn't a classic, but it was very interesting. There was lots of interesting talking points and quite a lot of drama in parts. At one point, there was this brilliant battle between Pedro, Marc, and Martin for 3rd place at the time, and that was really exciting. And of course, the sprint race yesterday, I think, was maybe the best sprint that we've ever had. It was absolutely fabulous and a wonderful, wonderful way to open the season. Combine that with, really good attendance. And I think this was a really successful start for the 2026 season. The only thing was I couldn't help but feel that today's action took something of a backseat when you put it into the context of what's going on in the world and the fact that we don't really know how or when we're going to go home. So that was my only kind of downer on this weekend, and that was very much out of MotoGP's control.
Dave, I can barely wait.
I'm supposed to be the curmudgeon here, but I'm sitting here thinking, no, 9 out of 10, mate. 9. 9? That was, absolutely.
Have you ever awarded a 9?
Yes, I think I once awarded.
Aragon, probably.
Yeah. think I once awarded it 11, but that might have been a mistake. But anyway, no, I mean, like this was exactly the start that the season needed. We had a fantastic sprint race with controversy, with battles, with two of the great names of the sport going up against each other, especially, the old champion versus the young usurper. Even the main race wasn't a great race, but there was lots of things there. There was lots to talk about. It was a great event. It was exactly what it was needed. And I will say, I do feel very sorry for everyone who is going to have to go home. I mean, I don't feel quite so sorry for it as everyone who is having to suffer through getting bombed and murdered. But that's that's all it is. But I do hope that they find that you find a flight home.
It's been great recording this podcast again, at Grand Prix races. And it's also great to see that so many people are joining us again on the Patreon channel. So a big thanks to everyone there who's joined the community. But Neil, one of the reasons, I guess, is because we have a great competition coming up.
Yeah, we do, Ed. It is a chance to win 2 paddock passes to a MotoGP or World Superbike round of your choice this year. Obviously, Thailand is out because we've already had it. I would say Brazil is probably a bit tight also, but we're going to be running this competition for another couple of days, maybe another week. So go to patreon.com/Paddock Pass Podcast, sign up to become a Paddock Insider for a year, and reply to the competition post, and you'll automatically be entered into the draw. And we've had a really good reaction to this. I think we've had 100 people entering already. So yeah, make sure that you do that.
Yeah, we've got some good content coming up as well as our midweek show. We have an exclusive interview with Red Bull KTM Tech 3 team principal Gunter Steiner, who was in the paddock this weekend, and plenty more to come. We hope you enjoyed this show. Let us know what you think in the comments, whether you agree with any of our takes. We always like a good discussion. We'll be back in a couple of days with some more MotoGP observations. Thanks again.